Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We hope you enjoyed our background music and are excited for the event to start. My name is Zachary Gersten. I am the technical manager for our exciting fireside chat on anti-ultra-processed food policies. Thank you, everyone, for taking part in our first research conference day of ANH 2022. You all know the drill by now. Everything that you might need to access about the conference can be found on our website. But before we start the chat, I have a few technical announcements just to ensure that our experience is smooth and as interactive as possible. So of course, the session is being recorded and will be posted on the ANH website following the conference. All participants have been muted upon entry, but we really encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you're from, what organization you're affiliated with. Later on in the session, we'll have a Q&A session. But if you have any questions, definitely put them in the chat box throughout. We'll make sure that we can take those questions and have them available to our speakers after. If you have any Zoom issues, send us a private message in the chat box. You should see our staff with ANH Academy in their name in parentheses after their real names. The session will also have live simultaneous translation in French. So if you would like to listen to the session in French, click the interpretation button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select French. You're also welcome to write French in the chat box, but please speak clearly and slowly to ensure that our interpreters can listen and hear properly. I think that's about it. I'm going to hand it over to Sunita Kadial.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are from this world. Thanks for joining us. This is our first ANH Academy week true hybrid event. So we are very excited, but we're also finding that it's an extremely complicated business, but we have not done so badly today. And thanks for being patient with us. So this is the last session of the day, followed by which we do have side events. Please do join us there as well. We are really excited to bring this fireside chat entitled Commercial Determinants of Nutrition and What Can the World Learn from the Latin American Experience. Over the last few years, we have been hearing an increasing demand by the ANH Academy constituents, our members, as well as our stakeholders to embrace more centrally the power, politics, governance of food systems and what that means for nutrition and health. Last year, we had a very powerful panel discussion on power, priorities, and evidence in what we are assuming, what we want to see in our envisioned food systems transformation for sustainable and healthy food systems. This year, that was a large topic we gathered. So this year, we wanted to focus further on a specific issue and what that means for nutrition and health, which is the commercial determinants of health in this gamut of power and politics, governance, and accountability within the food system and implications for human health. We know that Latin America is ahead of the curve in terms of these commercial determinants and how they have played out in their health outcomes and what policy actions have worked or not worked, why or why not. There's quite a lot that we could all learn from the Latin American experience, but my own feeling, and I think I echo several other people, is that we are not listening enough and learning enough from this Latin American experience. If we do, I think we can leapfrog and not have to make some of the mistakes that have been inadvertently made, and also seek solutions that are working wonderfully well after a long struggle in Latin America. We will hear from that from our panelists. We have two most prominent experts from Latin America to walk us through that in this fireside chat to speak to this issue. And this chat will be moderated by none other than Stenica Anima, who is the current Executive Secretary of UN Nutrition. Stenica is a nutritionist and an agricultural economist, and she's the first executive secretary of UN Nutrition, which was established in 2020. And prior to that, she was the coordinator of UNSCN, Standing Committee on Nutrition, and which was the predecessor to the UN Nutrition. From 2003 to 2015, she worked in NGOs, both on policy as well as action, and her bio is on our website. Please do take a look at that as well as the other speakers' bios. On to you, Stenica. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for these guys' kind introduction words, Sunita. And it's my pleasure to be with you with this so-called fireside chat, even though personally I would have preferred a waterside chat because I'm calling in from Rome and I'm afraid we are experiencing a heat wave as we speak. So anyway, I'll bear with you. And anyway, it's a hot topic also, the commercial determinants of nutrition in Latin America. So the naming of this event is not so bad. So just a few introduction words from me as well. I will not bore you with detailed figures, just again mentioning that the figures of malnutrition in Latin America are high and alarming. Despite economic growth, maybe I could say. So it's not just, you know, malnutrition. People often think about undernutrition, and yes, there are still quite a few countries, even in Latin America, with high numbers of persistent numbers of undernutrition. But we are also speaking of alarming figures of overweight and obesity, which have a tremendous impact on non-communicable diseases and also even cause premature death. Latin America, as Sunita said, is interesting. It is a region that has shown some economic growth, and despite that, why are we not improving on nutrition? I know there is this stubborn misconception, economic growth leading per default to better nutrition. And, you know, nutrition is it's not so truth. Very often looking at these other preconditions like gender, physical access to nutrition, and all kinds of determinants. But today we will look more closely at commercial determinants. So, Carlos, you are Professor of Nutrition and Public Health in Brazil at the School of Public Health. You are an expert in methods in population, nutritional and food intake assessments. You know about determinants of non-communicable diseases, determinants of food processing and human health. So please, Carlos, help me out here. Economic growth can lead to positive dietary outcomes, such as more diverse diets, moving away from monotonous staple crops, including possibly more nutritious food. So what is the problem? Why is it not happening, specifically in Latin America? Over to you.
Thank you, Stine. And I'm very happy to be here today to talk about the commercial determinants of health problems. And as you were saying, I mean, we should expect from economic development, from increasing income, particularly among low-income groups, we could expect progress in terms of health, right? And this particularly regards diet. Increasing income should help people to consume more non-staple foods, more nutrient-dense staple foods like fruits and vegetables, legumes, nuts, and even animal-sourced foods, right? So that's what we would expect, and with this diversification of diet, we could expect a reduction in malnutrition. And actually, I think this economic development and increasing income particularly among the poor, was certainly the main reason for European populations, for American, US population, eliminate undernutrition in the first half of the last century. And even the reduction in undernutrition in low and middle income countries, not elimination, unfortunately, but reduction that we saw in the second half of the 20th century was due to this economic development, partially at least. And of course, other things were important, public policies, etc. But increasing income was important to diversify the diet and then reduce undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, etc., etc. But nowadays, big changes in the food system are making things more complicated. And among these big changes, I want to emphasize changes in the way food has been processed and the reasons why we are processing food. So we see, particularly in this century, more and more food processing being used not to increase duration of foods, which is very important for food security, making food preparation easier or enhancing food sensory properties. What we see today is food processing more and more being used to create alternatives to foods. And these alternatives have a name. I mean, they are ultra-processed foods. So with the advent of mass production of ultra-processed foods in the food supply, and with the penetration of these foods using massive marketing strategies, unregulated massive marketing strategies, we see more and more people consuming less staple food, but instead of going to fruit and vegetables, legumes, animal sourced foods, people are replacing these staple and non-staple foods by ultra-processed foods. And the result is a profound deterioration of diet quality and a pandemic of obesity, diabetes, and other diet-related diseases. So the situation is becoming more complex. Economic growth is not enough, and we need more. Certainly we need more, but I'm sure Camila can tell us more about what we could do in terms of to stop this penetration of this ultra-processed food in our countries and stop this deterioration of diet and the pandemic of obesity.
Thank you, Carlos. That's indeed challenging, and you issued quite a few warnings there. Basically, warning against ultra-processed food that is combined with, let's say, aggressive marketing, leading to all the problems you described. So, Camila, over to you. I mean, you are a researcher at the Institute of Nutrition and Food Technology in Chile, and your research really helps you to understand the early origins of obesity and diet-related chronic diseases. And you are also coordinating food environment platforms, and you are involved in the Chilean food labeling and marketing law. So Camila, you heard all these challenges, which are very, very, very true. So how can we make that differences? How can we use of the food environment to make it easier for people to opt for healthier options? Can you give us some positive examples after this very challenging contribution from Carlos? Over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, as Carlos was summarizing, what happened in our region was that food was basically replaced by ultra-processed products. And that's what has been happening in the last 2-3 decades. And unfortunately, that led us to have very high rates of obesity and nutrition-related chronic diseases. So something had to be done. Countries started to think on how to escape this basically massive invasion of ultra food and products. And we will discuss, but later on. But we lost some time trying to work with companies, trying to find ways of self-regulating, but it didn't work. So I would say in the last decades, government has decided to take a more strong leadership and regulate what's happening in terms of food environments. And I have to say that because government have been very strong on defining what's best for the population in terms of health and nutrition, we can now show some success. Key things could be, one, we started to show to people which were these unhealthy foods. And we did this by incorporating the use of a warning label in front of the packages. So this is very different from using nutrient content or claims. This is really a warning that this is a food that should not be eaten in massive quantities because it's unhealthy for you. And it has worked very well. It's a graphic design. It doesn't require to have a lot of knowledge or education. It's really rapidly informing the consumer that this is a food that you should not be eating in large quantities. We have also had in Chile in particular very good examples of establishing very large restrictions to marketing. We were earlier saying that these are products that are very intensively marketed, and particularly to children and to people who have less ability to understand that these products are not necessarily the best for your health. So in Chile, we have implemented a very large marketing restriction, particularly to children. So these products cannot be promoted, sell, advertised in different venues, and particularly in schools and daycares, they cannot be provided by these programs. I finally want to highlight that we also have very good examples increasing the price of some of these products. Mexico has become a gold standard in terms of what they have done in terms of their soda tax. And there are right now other countries discussing similar type of policies for really preventing or trying to resist what has happened with the ultra processed food consumption in our region. So maybe we can keep talking about this in the next few minutes.
Sure, Camila. Thank you very much. And I think those examples are very, very interesting and telling. And I'm happy they have been proven to be so successful. So you referred clearly to the food environment and to measures you can take, like food labeling, front of pack labeling, and the soda tax with an impact on prices. So really nudging consumers to make a healthier choice. But then I'd like to go back to Carlos with another stubborn, let's say, misconception that it's always the individual that is responsible for his or her diet, as opposed to what Camila just said. It's the food environment. So let's delve a little bit deeper there. So who is responsible? Is it the individual that's accountable to his or herself? Or what's there? Can you say something about that accountability measurement and individuals, or rather food environment governance? Please, over to you.
Yeah, and yeah, I would like to start by emphasizing the difference I think exists between Latin America and particularly North America regarding the role of the state and role of regulations. So here in Latin America, we our cultural background is very different, and I would say that most people accept that some economic activities should be regulated. This, like in other countries, maybe this is seen as a sin, right? Something that I mean, don't touch this. This is my food. I decided what to do. So people in Latin America are used to value, to recognize the importance of regulation. So in several, of course, we don't want to see regulation, state regulating things that are not important, that are not relevant. So I think that the resistance that sometimes we see against regulation of food is because people imagine that everything I eat will be controlled. Someone will tell me what I should eat, etc., etc. Of course, this won't work. But So I think the important thing is to have these regulations that Camila start to talk together with information to the people. So people must know why food, which is something that was not regulated in the past. We regulated food because of food safety, right? So food should not be a carrier of bacteria and infections, etc., etc. But why now we need to regulate food in other aspects? And I think this is related again to the way food is being processed in nowadays. And in this process of to inform people for making them understand why food advertisement should be regulated, the same way I think tobacco, alcohol advertisement are regulated. But to explain this, we need to make people understand that the food system has changed, and now these regulations are necessary. I think inform people's means to include, or first of all, means to have consistent national dietary guidelines. So national dietary guidelines are a way to inform people about diet, about health, but traditional dietary guidelines are more like nutrition textbooks that are written for professional, for nutritionists. So what we need are tools that can inform, can educate the whole population and not experts, right? So with appropriate national dietary guidelines, I think we can make regulation much more palatable and much more acceptable. And I think it's important to emphasize some aspects related to the need to regulate ultra-processed food. First, is I already mentioned, is the fact that ultra-processed food is today the main driver of deterioration of diet quality. Second, is the main driver of the pandemic of obesity and diabetes. And I think one important point also is the fact that food processing are unhealthy by design. And this is particularly because of the fact that they are formulated to be addictive. So ultra-processed foods are not formulated in our kitchens, of course. We cannot make ultra-processed food in our kitchen or in regular kitchens. They are formulated in laboratories, and they are formulated with the main aim to make people prefer these products instead of real foods, and worse, consuming them more and more in quantities that are not appropriate. So I think this, the fact that they are addictive by design, these justify regulation the same way we have regulation for tobacco. So tobacco are also made on purpose to make people addicted to the product. So, and I think this analogy is, for me, is what perhaps more justify the need of regulation. But I think we have always to accompany regulation with information, education to the population.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. I agree with you. That is extremely important to make it palatable, that information together with regulation. And then, as Camila said, not self-regulation, but not voluntary regulation, but rather a mandatory regulation. And you provided quite some telling examples, and your analogy with the tobacco and the tobacco industry is quite telling as well. I'd like to go back to Camila. Let me quickly check if there's any question from the audience so far. Not yet, but please feel free to ask questions. So Camila, regulation is part of governance, and part of governance there is accountability. Could you maybe say something, delve a little bit deeper there, also maybe pointing out how public health objectives should go hand in hand with economic objectives to really make it one coherent package of policies and governance, and related to that, the accountability, of course. Over to you, and then I see some questions coming in, so I think we will have time to respond to some questions in the audience. Camila, over to you.
Yeah, I wanted to start picking up on something that Carlos mentioned and you as well, the idea of information. And I think that that's why this session is so relevant and critical, because we need to be aware that there are these big food companies that are that they are trying worldwide to sell these products, and that they will market them, they will promote them, they will sit in the table with policymakers, with researchers, and everyone to sell these products. So that's why it's so relevant to start to talk about this and to be aware that we need to be responding on a coordinated way to really make sure that people receive food rather than unhealthy products. So along those lines, I think that there is a need to really create norms for interacting with big corporates, particularly for low and middle income countries, that we have the challenge that we have to grow, to have this economic growth, but at the same time, we need to be taking care of the health of the population and the health of the planet. So there is a need to realize that this is going to become a very relevant actor, and we need to define the boundaries in which we will be interacting. And that's true for academia, this is true for government, this is true for the parliament. And I think that in the Latin American region, we were somehow slow in realizing that this was the case. And if we can share something with the rest of the world, and is that now we are aware that this is the way to go. We need to establish norms for interaction. We need to get areas or spaces in which the industry is not participating or deciding about some aspects of policy making, and we need to keep everybody accountable of what are the ultimate goals of their actions. And I think that that's something very key if we really want to advance and progress on a way of I mean, as you were saying, of development, but a development that considers health and sustainability as part of this development.
Thank you, Camila. Again, very, very interesting remarks you made. You already alluded a little bit to the role of large food companies sitting in fact, policy rooms together with policymakers, which can be really, really rich, obviously. I also noted that from the audience, there are some additional questions about food companies. So we already said something about food companies in policy making, but always, sometimes you see also that large companies have a deep influence in nutrition, such as members of parliament with industry interests. So then you see conflicts of interest, for example. So could maybe Carlos, could you say something about how can we separate nutrition from vested interest in ultra-processed food companies?
Yeah, I think it's essential to first of all, to understand what are the strategies these transnational corporations are using to push their products, right? So I think we can identify, there are several strategies, but I think we mentioned some of them here. So first of all is the aggressive marketing, which is, I think someone mentioned the digital marketing. Maybe Camila can tell us how they are doing, because Chile is far ahead on this. So how they are doing to cope with this new digital marketing, which is really terrible. A second strategy is the influence of politicians to avoid regulations, because they know that with regulation, the life is much more complicated for these companies. I mean, so the same playbook of the tobacco industry. They try to convince politicians that regulation is not necessary, of individual problems, etc., etc. And the third strategy, I think, is very complex. Is that I think someone also mentioned in the question and answers, the lobby within the research, within the academia. So, and this is done by funding research, first of all, and now we see, I mean, it was interesting when we proposed this concept of food ultra processing in 2009. For 4 or 5 years, it was used by some researchers, and then we use it in the development of the national dietary guidelines in Brazil, and other countries did the same. And then many researchers start to analyze their data sets, old data sets, cohorts data sets, to see if the consumption of ultra-processed food was really associated with diseases, etc., etc. And then there was explosion of studies, all of them showing association, none of them showing protection. And then what we see today is almost every week there's a new paper in some actually secondary journals. I mean, because now this is another problem, because today, I mean, unfortunately, you have so many journals that everything is published, right? So, and every week we see one new paper saying that ultra-processed food is not a useful concept because it is confused, and it's not reliable, and with very poor actually arguments and very poor empirical data. But in any case, I see this as a sort of orchestrated reaction to make the topic less attractive or less reliable. And but one thing I want to say about this is that probably we'll have the International Congress on Nutrition in Japan, Tokyo, on December, right? So it was interesting because some ultra-processed food company try, as they do always, try to fund the Congress and penetrate the Congress, organize symposium, etc., etc. And there was a reaction of the community, and letters were sent to the organizer saying that was not acceptable. And just a few days ago, the president of the Congress said, no, we made some mistakes and we are correcting, and these companies won't be in the same, in the main activities, etc., etc. So it's it can work. I mean, it can work, and it's absolutely necessary, because if the research community is on the side of these companies, then I mean, how we can convince politicians? Because if politicians say, but I read yesterday that this, what you are saying is not correct, etc., etc. So we also need to work within our research community.
Yeah, no, I agree very much, and what you said before about the the plethora or the cascade of research, and then almost tiring people with information, whereas earlier we said information is so important, but it should be genuine information and evidence-based and clear information, like the information we see on pack labeling, like the ones that really targeted information for specific target groups. This is what we need to know. This is clear information, proven information, and we can use, but not like a cascade, a plethora of words that would confuse people. Thanks for that. Camilla, over to you. I saw there was a question about digital marketing. So can you say something about that? Because digital marketing these days influences strongly the food environment. And before you start, I just got information from the organizers that instead of stopping at 6:15, that's my time, sorry. So in 2 minutes, we have a few additional minutes, let's say eight more minutes from now. So I hope to take one more question after this one, and then we need to close. Apologies for that. So over to you, Camilla.
So thank you. Yes, I think that marketing in general is a huge challenge for promoting healthier diets. I think that digital, it's a key and very active area nowadays for defining limits and monitoring systems. A number of people are working in trying to move forward and define some kind of codes, maybe similar to what has been done with infant formula. I think we should be moving toward that goal. And I want to emphasize something that has been said by Carlos, and also by talking about agreeing on some norms. I think that we need to understand that we need to work together. And there was a question regarding how do we make louder the voice of the people instead of the industries. And I think that the way to go is by working together. I think that in our region, we have learned that we researchers need to work together, advocates need to work together, advocates and researchers need to work together. And that's the only way that we will be able to make some progress, because here there is a huge imbalance in power distribution. So if I have to give a message, is that I think that we need to gather collective support for promoting the type of diets that we think are the best for the people. And we need to use the best evidence for guiding those decisions. And I think that we have learned that in Latin America, we have a big experience contributing to what has been happening in other countries. And what we have seen are increasing progress in terms of regulating the ultra food companies. So I would share that piece of advice. Let's try to work all together to promote the diets that we want for the people.
Yes, thank you, Camilla, and thank you for that advice. I mean, that was, of course, one of the objectives of this chat, fireside or waterside chat, to also see how we can prevent similar challenges, problems in other regions. We have a little time, so I'd like the two of you to consider two questions, which I will read out to you in a minute. You can each pick one, and your answer should be brief, 1 minute max, and then we have to close off. So one question is, what about fortified commercial products, and how do you see that one? So either of you can pick that one. And another question is more about the laws and the regulation. So instead of developing new laws, many countries have existing laws, but these are not being implemented to their full extent. So what is your opinion and advice there? So over to any of you. I hope you don't pick the same question.
So basically, I think that the person who did that comment, I think she or he is totally right. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I think that nutrition is one, and health in general is a single topic, and we should be looking into what's already in place and just defining the boundaries of what we want, like, for example, for procurement programs, for marketing, and what are the limits? I would say we need to define limits for marketing. We need to define limits for things that are offered to kids in the schools, in the hospitals, and so on. So my personal experience is that we will move faster if we can just think on what's already in place and try to adapt it and put the necessary I don't know, guidelines in using what's already existing. So that's an excellent way to go.
Yeah, perfect. So we move faster. We need to move faster because it's urgent. We can't wait, and therefore we need to use what is already there, and if needed, adapt that. So over to you, Carlos, for the question on the fortification of commercial of fortified of ultra processed food. Over to you.
Yeah. So fortification. To discuss fortification, we need to review our knowledge on how food and diet relates with health. It's Georgis Krinis wrote a book called Nutritionism, which is quite interesting to demonstrate that the relationship between diet and health is much more complex. It goes beyond individual nutrients. So then we need to, there's very important here, the concept of food matrix. So apparently food is more than the nutrients they contain, because there are synergies, there are several effect modification. So all these possibilities to resolve the nutritional problems by fortifying some foods. I mean, there's several examples that this does not work. One of very known example is the supplementation with vitamin E of smokers to prevent lung cancer. So people receive a lot of vitamin E and they develop at the end more lung cancer than the placebo group. So there are several examples of this showing that this is not possible. Really, to nourish a person, the science was not able to find a way to nourish people without food. I mean, just by using nutrients. And the final thing I want to say about this,
really final, that we need to close.
Yeah,
the leaving for side events.
Because some people think that we need ultra processed food to avoid consumption of animal foods, and this would be possible with ultra processed vegan food. So, but reality is that unfortunately this is not possible.
Yeah, no, I like it how you round it off, because I don't think we believe in superfoods. There is no single food that can be called like superfood or super healthy, and then you can do without. And that's food is more than nutrients. It would bring me back to a statement we made at the start of this event, that ultra processed foods are products and not food. Someone, either you or both of you mentioned that, and I think that is something we maybe can keep in mind. Let's stick to foods and not to products. Let's look at the environment. Let's support that regulation with real information, supporting a regulation with informing consumers and producers, potentially with dietary guidelines, supported by independent research. I think these are some of the messages that came out, and we can only do that by sticking together, researchers, but also policymakers, to really build that enabling environment and build that policy environment that is helpful to sustain public health and therefore improve nutrition. I thank both of you very, very much for your strong contribution. Thank you to the organizers. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
See
you.
you there.